Difficult session, I guess, because lunch is waiting for you guys outside, right? But what I'm going to do is hopefully give you some food for thought, all right? My name is Narayan Ramurthy. You can call me Naru. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Global PayX. And as beautifully introduced, what we do is accounts receivable and payables automation. Our focus is B2B, right? So through the morning, I've heard some very interesting phrases, one of which being, for example, reverse innovation from India kind of going global. That's one of our aspirations. So we started off in India. We are now market leaders in India on the AR automation side. So we are a dual headquartered company out of Bombay and the US. And we're taking this innovation hopefully global, right? So now we have a few customers in the US, kind of want to go to Europe, et cetera. So reverse innovation. Second is, we heard a lot about changing consumer preferences and how that's kind of challenging CFOs. But one of the topics which we have not heard about are B2B kind of stakeholders of yours, right? So all of you sitting here would definitely have, B2B stakeholders on the AR side, such as dealer distributors, marketplaces like Amazon, modern trade, institutional customer base. Similarly, on the accounts payable side, a bunch of vendors who could be SMEs, large companies who are supplying to you. That's what we kind of solve for, all right? Okay, why is this complicated, right? This is the reason it's complicated. And I don't want to kind of preach to the choir because all of you guys live and die this life, right? Right, not die, live and breathe this life, apologies. But, the challenges here are, there is invoice presentment challenges, there are credit notes and debit notes. There are partial payments, right? For example, if there is a lakh invoice that's due, if somebody pays you 80,000 rupees, you don't know why the 20,000 rupee got deducted. Your teams have to reach out to sales, your teams have to reach out to customers. It's a lot of emails, a lot of calling, et cetera, right? Then comes the mode of payments. Now, interestingly, India has seen a huge revolution in B2B payments. So checks as a mode of payment is coming down dramatically. ACH, for example, is becoming very powerful, right? Today on our platforms, 98% of the payments in B2B happens electronically. Most of it on ACH, a lot of it on NEFT RTGS, some of it on cards, UPI, et cetera, right? Then comes the whole reconciliation back to your ERPs. Again, many companies still use people to kind of post these entries to ERPs, whether it is receivables or payables. We automate all of that, right? So that's the space we kind of play in. Now, how do we do this, right? We sit in the center, we integrate to your ERP, whether it is SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, legacy ERPs, whatnot, right? Second is you may have one or more banks as your receivables or payable banks. Our platforms have the ability to read any bank statements, okay? Now, on the left side, which is your accounts receivable side, imagine you have broadly two sets of customers. One is institutional customers. These could be the Reliances of the world. These could be the Amazons of the world, right? Or you could have dealer distributors, franchisees, agencies. Now, the challenges for these two segments is different. What we enable is for the dealer distributors, we enable EIPP. What I intend to do is show you a quick glimpse, a little bit of a show and tell of how our platform kind of looks like. But imagine a world where these dealer distributors are able to log into your customer portal, view invoices, credit notes, debit notes, make payments to you, make disputes and deductions, view statements, right? All of which automatically gets reconciled to the ERP, right? So that's what our EIPP or customer portal platform does. We call it free pay, which is the middle of the left side, right? You may be selling to institutional customers, like if you're an auto industry, you'll be selling to Honda, Toyota, et cetera. If you're an FMCG, you're going to be selling to Reliance and DMart and Amazon, et cetera. Now, the challenge there is all of these customers make a payment to you, and they send a payment advice or a document in their format. You can't define that format, or your company can't define that format. That's where we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to automatically read those documents and reconcile it to your source of truth, which is in your ERP, right? Like invoices, debit notes, and credit notes, and automatically reconcile all of that, right? So that's our space on the AR side. On the AP side, it's a mirror image. What we create is a vendor portal, right? Where your vendors can interact with you digitally. They can view purchase orders, GRNs, they can upload invoices, they can view statements, so on and so forth. Second is in terms of invoices. Again, invoice processing is a very tedious job, right? Often it's a thankless job because there are people sitting and looking at different formats of invoices and punching it into the ERP, et cetera, et cetera. We are again using ML and AI to auto-read those documents to try and do a straight-through processing of these invoices. So that's broadly what we do. Lastly, we are also getting involved extensively in embedded finance, right? So we have partnered with several banks and non-banks in India, such as Indify, Mintify, IndusInd, Yes Bank, to enable you to lend on both the AR and AP side, right? Think of supply chain financing, think of channel financing. We enable digital flows of all of that. So that's our space. Who do we do it for? So any industry, which will include all of you here, right, which has a high velocity of invoices, high velocity of payments, high velocity of reconciliations, deductions, etc., we become relevant, right? So that's a quick snapshot of our customer base and our partner base. So JP Morgan is an early stage investor in us, but today we have partnerships with HDFC Bank, Axis Bank in India, and bunch of global banks like Deutsche Bank, Standard Chartered, etc. Why do they partner with us? Because when they come to you to offer their receivables or payable services, right, the accounting services, account services, banking services, they want to have a differentiator. And we become the technology differentiator which they offer to you, right? That's why banks kind of partner with us. Okay, the so what, right? So what are the kind of metrics we have helped those customers with? So DSOs, right, which is the single biggest metric for all of you, right, on the receivable side. On an average, wherever we implement the customer portal or EIPP, we reduce it by 20%, which is the big number. So for example, if you're sitting at 45 days, target being 35 days, within 6 months, we can probably get it down to about 38 days, right? So that's the power of the platform. Similarly, trying to move people away from checks in terms of payment modes, so digital or electronic payment modes like ACH. Reducing your reconciliation costs and time, right, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the metrics that we help you address. And lastly, just a couple of examples. So Bridgestone and Stanley Black & Decker, this is in press. So the Bridgestone CFO said, with Jyotsna, we have helped her save about 7 million euros in India, right, over a year's period in terms of working capital. We have helped her reduce DSOs by about 6 days within the first 9 months of implementation. Similar kind of numbers for Stanley Black & Decker, right? So that's in terms of the power of what we do. Now, what I also want to do very quickly is give you a quick glimpse of what this looks like, right? So this is our EIPP platform. So imagine you are Stanley Black & Decker, and obviously this is mock data, right? And Mohit Electricals is your distributor or your customer. So when your customer or distributor logs in, he or she will get to see all the outstanding invoices in the form of tiles. That's what he or she gets to see here, right? Through this platform, your customer can click and view invoice. Now, this can be an e-invoice, which your IRN number and QR code, etc., kind of displayed, right? So you no longer need to send invoices via paper. You no longer need to send B2B invoices an email. Your customer could say, hey, I didn't get the invoice. All those days are gone, right, because of what we kind of enable. Then you see there is a red tag here, right? This is like an invoice is overdue. So we send dunning messages or collection messages to these customers. Similarly, if you want to configure an early payment cash discount, right, we can enable it on the platform. So for example, if an invoice is to be paid, let's say on the 30th of September, you may want to say if the customer pays you today, there is a 1% early payment cash discount available. That configuration can be on our platform. The customer will then see a green tag saying if you pay today, you get a 1 or 2% off on this particular invoice, right? Then comes the payment of the invoice. Here, for example, this is where deductions come in. Now, if you are Stanley Black & Decker, you can configure your deduction codes on our platform. So when your customers are paying you and they want to make a part payment, like a TDS deduction, like a goods short supplied, goods damaged, right? We spoke about expired food or whatever some time back. If it's any of that, right, they can select each of that here. For example, let's say short material supplied. They can enter a deduction amount, right, and say done. So the value is kind of deducted. All the credit notes available to your customers are shown here. They can choose to apply a credit note in lieu of an invoice, right? So here I'm going to apply a credit note. So the net amount automatically gets adjusted, okay? Then, as I mentioned, we also integrate all the payment rails you want, right? So if you want to enable ACH payments, if you want to enable NEFT RTGS, you want to enable card payments, right? UPI payments for your customers, B2B customers, we kind of enable that. Your end customer can choose it. Now, please note, this is all your payer or your customer actually paying you, okay? And then they enter a PIN and say pay now. Now, As soon as the customer pays this money, 7308, and we view the funds in your bank account, whether it is with HDFC Bank or ICICI Bank or SBI or whatever, we have the ability to read those bank statements. We have everything to reconcile the platform, right? It reconciles this to your ERP. What does that mean? It knocks off your invoice, it knocks off the credit note. If there is a TDS, it goes and automatically posts it into your TDS subledger. That's what we mean straight-through processing. For Bridgestone, we have automated 98% of AR between them and their buyers, right? Which is, I think, unheard of in the industry. Those are the kind of metrics we have kind of helped achieve. And your payer can get to view a real-time status of all the payments. For example, yellow means an ACH has been initiated. Money, it takes a 4-hour, 8-hour cycle for it to kind of happen. If it is a card payment, it will be instantaneous, et cetera, right? They can view credit notes, they can view statements, so on and so forth. Now, this is the buyer's view, payer's view, right? This is your view, right? Your AR teams, treasury heads, CFOs will get to see a dashboard which gives you a real-time status of what's outstanding, what's paid, right? In your DSO buckets, right, your collection bucket, 0 to 30 days, how many invoices are due, what is that amount? So it gives you a wealth of analytics around your AR and similar stuff on the AP, which you and your teams can use to improve your overall working capital or AR health, right? You can also dig deep. For example, if you go to the invoice view, right, there is also, let's kind of move on. But you can also kind of get to see, by invoice, how was it paid? It was an NEFT payment, a credit note was applied. So excruciating amount of detail can be available here, which is very difficult to kind of post or get from your ERP, right? So that's the kind of analytics you get to see. Now, pretty quickly, this is the other ecosystem. This is where your end buyer will not come into your customer portal or EIPP, right? This is where you're selling to, let's say, a Reliance, Tata Motors, or whatnot, right? Now, what we do here is, let's take an example. So let's assume this is the outstanding in your ledger, in your ERP for Reliance, right? So X crores, Y number of debit notes, Z number of credit notes. This is from your ERP. Now, let's assume Reliance makes a payment to you today morning, okay? And they send what's called a payment advice or remittance advice. Let me show you an example of that. It's just kind of opening up. Okay, so this is an example of a payment advice or a remittance advice of Reliance, right? It could run into hundreds of pages. There could be several line items here. But what does it essentially contain? It essentially says how much has Reliance paid you, and for what have they paid, right? Which invoice, and in this case, there is a deduction made. Right? This is what my machines read automatically. It reads and it reconciles to your version of truth, which is your ledger, right? So when I go in here, each line here is an outstanding invoice of Reliance, and this is the outstanding amount. Let's say it's about 2 lakhs. My machines read those documents and reconcile. So in this case, Reliance has paid 2 lakhs against your outstanding invoice of 2 lakhs. Hence, we have interpreted it as a perfect match. This is an awesome state where we go and post this into your ERP systems without anybody having to kind of manually touch it, right? The other state is partially reconciled. So we classify reconciliations into fully reconciled happy state, partially reconciled where there's a deduction made by Reliance. How do you solve for that deduction, right? So we support workflows for that within your organizations. And lastly, not found is exception cases where, let's assume Reliance said they have paid invoice 123, but that invoice 123 is not outstanding in your ledger, right? So this is the sophistication of the capability of reconciliation that we do. Now, the same platform can also be used for 26AS recon, right? Because, when the buyer is kind of paying you, there is a deduction he or she is kind of made, and you post it into your TDS subledger or whatnot. End of the quarter, you get the 26AS statement. Your teams have to actually, tax teams or finance teams, have to reconcile those 2 data sets. As far as we are concerned, it is 2 data sets and it has to be kind of reconciled. So those use cases, et cetera, also can kind of be automated by us. Now, I'm going to pause and, I just wanted to kind of give you guys a quick glimpse of, the kind of stuff that we do around AR and AP automation. I have, several of my partners and clients here, so thanks for being there. And those of you who are still not partners, happy to have a conversation to try and see if we can be a part of your finance digital transformation journeys. Thank you.